Welcome to Writer Syndrome, a podcast about writing from start to finish. I'm Russ Capasso, and joining me as always is Tim Ledney. This episode, we have a special guest, Michael Bahler, who's a New Jersey-based writer whose short fiction and nonfiction have appeared in New York Times, Glimmer Train, Nerve, and many others, including The Brooklyn Rail. Michael, thanks for joining us and hopping on our small but fun little podcast about writing we have.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's growing by the day. We have thousands of downloads. So
over the year,
yeah. Add it all up right now, thousands. So yeah, thanks for joining us. You've got we did a little reading, and Tim are following up behind the scenes, getting ready for this, and you've kind of written a lot of things in a lot of different areas, short stories, New York Times, various journals, and whatnot. So it's kind of great to have you on here and get this other perspective. I think we kind of want to dive into talking about some of your short story experience, because we actually never really talked about that on the cast and kind of what that's like. And
I don't think I've written a short story myself in oh my God, 20 years.
Yeah.
So and I feel like that's an area where a lot of authors are advised to begin, to kind of hone your chops and figure out your strengths and weaknesses. So what's your process like when it comes to writing short stories?
You see, I started out, like you're saying, as a short story writer, and then the industry tells you there's no market for short stories. So you should go to long fiction. And in a way, I never could get back to short. So basically, as a kid, in my teens and my 20s, I wrote short stories. I got, some published, right? I thought I was really doing well with that medium. But then when you try to get an agent, it's so hard to get a short story collection published, and they really push you to write long fiction. So I kind of switched to writing novels, and that kind of got me away from what I thought, ideally, maybe I would have been best if I just stayed writing short fiction. So then for a while,
use the short stories as like a calling card? Like, was it helpful to have that in your portfolio as you were moving forward, like as an example of your writing?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to get published, right? So, in a way that gets you noticed, because it's not like a literary journal is going to take your novel. Mm-hmm. So in a way, it's kind of weird in that you have to write short fiction to get kind of into the game. And then when you try to attract agents, it's almost that where's your novel? You got to write a novel. But they're different, you know what I mean? So I do think people can be good short story writers and kind of flail at longer, in a longer form. And they're different, the plotting is different. It's just a different, Chekhov wrote short stories, like Carver wrote short stories, like they're people. But I think in this market, everything is, if you really care about getting something published in book form, I almost feel that if maybe if you're winning, Pushcart prizes and you're really, really getting in the New Yorker, then you can get a short story collection published. But if not, the agents really push you to write longer stuff. So basically, then I moved to, so it's interesting. So I moved to, I wrote novels. And then when I had some issues with that, I went back to creative nonfiction, which is almost going back to short form, which maybe I should never have left.
So you moved into long form. Same genre though? Like, what genre were you writing in? Was it
it was like literary commercial fiction. It could be on either, probably, it's one of those things when you're both kind of literary and commercial. If you hit it right, then you can have a novel that's marketable and also substantive. But if you hit it wrong, then both camps are like, well, that's not literary fiction. And the other camp's like, that's not commercial fiction. Mm. So you're kind of trying to thread a needle a little bit.
We get into a lot of our topics on this podcast. We get into kind of like the nitty gritty of like planning and like plotting and whatnot. That jump from short stories to like a long form, did you find that difficult for like the plotting purposes and making sure you're like, wow, can I actually write 90, 80,000 words for like a full story?
Yeah. I mean, I have ADD, it's hard for me to focus like that. I can write manically, and then, it's hard. I almost find it where, as a plane where you take off and then, it's really hard to just keep that altitude of interest or intensity. And I guess maybe that's what I liked about short form. It's like everything is just there and you're not, you know what I mean? You don't have to kind of, it's like flying to Boston instead of flying to California or India or somewhere where you can kind of like keep that energy up and then just come down. It's just different. So in a way, a lot of times I would also start both my novels started out as short stories that I then tried to elongate, right?
Yep.
And maybe that would, I remember I took a class in college. So one semester in college, I was taking two classes that were kind of similar. And I had the idea that I could write the same paper for both classes.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to word it and find a topic that could fit both those classes. And, I really, I took all my energy and I found that one paper that would kind of address both. And I got, a B- or a C or something. Well, if I had written two papers, I probably would have done far better. And it probably would have been easier in a way.
So when you were sitting down to write short stories, right, did you have an outline? Was there a lot of intention? Because I feel like on our cast, we're getting very prescriptive, I think.
Yeah.
As I'm stepping into planning my next book, I'm in Russ's spreadsheets, I'm planning a lot right now. Was there a lot of planning that went into the short stories? And if so, no.
I wish I could do that. Maybe that's my failing as a novelist in a way, right? Because I just write, I'll get an idea and then I'll just run with it. Yep. And it's not like I know, there's some authors who say you should know the last line before you start. I wish I could do that. I just can't, a lot of times I'll just keep on running into something with short stuff. And then I'll wake up one day and I'll my unconscious mind figures it out. You know what I mean? So that's a maddening process. I'd much rather be able to sit there and ask generative AI to come up with an outline and just follow through with that. Do you guys actually, so you both come up with outlines and then you kind of...
So this is a running, debate between Tim and I. Tim is very much a pantser and I'm very much a planner. And I have my spreadsheets.
But I'll tell you, man,
plotting.
I think we've influenced each other in certain ways, right? Whereas Definitely. I think I'm planning a heck of a lot more this time around. And you're a little more comfortable with pantsing parts.
Yes.
What is pantsing? Pantsing is
basically how you're writing. Just there was no plan. You just start writing, and let it go.
Then maybe you find it in the edit, right? Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I think I'm planning so much this time is that my editing was so absolutely time consuming that I think I wasted a lot of time by not planning a little bit more. So I'm trying to rectify that here.
My family would go on road trips as a kid and we would never know where we're stopping.
I couldn't handle that. I couldn't do that.
It would be wherever my dad got tired. That's where we would stop. And then he would send my poor mom into some random hotel at 2 a.m. to see if they had any vacancies.
So is that how you write? You'll write to chapter 4 and you're like, I'm pretty tired.
I'm tired.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing.
And then I'll send the equivalent of my mother into the hotel and ask if it's okay if we stop here. Yeah. But that's I'm not advocating that. It's just how
I think it might be different too, right? Because you're writing, it sounds like more literary works. And I think Russ and I are very much leaning into commercial genre, subgenre fiction, which I think there is an expectation of. Some paint by the numbers expectations when it comes to the genres that we're writing in, which I don't know if literary fiction has that. I think you can take hard right turns a little less.
Ideally, you ever hear Kafka wrote Metamorphosis in 8 hours, where it was just some crazy manic. That's the problem. I wish I could do that. That I would take. But
he wrote it in 8 hours. But then, how much time did he spend editing it?
Probably four. I don't know.
So.
Yeah, I guess there's a way to look at it where if at the end of the day it works, then just do whatever works, right? You know what I mean?
It definitely worked for you, right? Because when you made the transition from short stories to full-length literary fiction, you got bites. You got bites from agents. You had interest. So it definitely works for you.
Well, but I eventually didn't. I don't not. In the background have 2 shiny novels that I can show you and sign one for you to give. To your dad.
Can you talk a little bit about that process then? How you would move from short fiction to long form to actually having a finished, polished manuscript, right?
I wouldn't say polished.
Are they ever polished?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. You could give me anything I wrote, and if I looked at it now, I'd be like, oh my God, I need to edit this. So then, I went to law school, but I also took some classes at Boston University's graduate creative writing program, which was kind of cool because I hated kind of going to law school. So then, I got to know more people, and then I started to think about the professor there was you got to write a novel, So then I took one of my short stories that was pretty well received, and I kind of drew that, brought it out. And then, I didn't send it. I hadn't finished it at that time. So I know a lot of times they're like, you got to finish it. But I just sent out a chapter or two or something. And I got one guy interested, and then he was just kind of ghosted me. And I eventually wrote some more, and then I sent it out to a bunch of agents, and one of them really liked it. And I had an agent.
You sent it out before it was done?
Yeah.
Oh, I read that's a big faux pas. Did it add additional pressure on you when you started to get interest to hurry up and finish?
I think part of me is that, and this is why kind of leads to my writer's block sometimes, in that if I know someone's interested in something, that's really good motivation for me to finish something. Well, that's the thing about a novel, in that you could be writing for years, really not getting any practical feedback on it, right?
Yeah.
And not know if you're going in the wrong direction, not knowing if anything's going to come of it. So it's kind of, having an agent be like, oh, I like this, that really kind of pushed me, which kind of is sad in that, theoretically, if I was more successful, then I would write more, because then I would be thinking people want to read this. But when you think you're just writing for yourself, or no one's going to read this, that kind of, for me, leads to writer's block sometimes, right? Or it makes me think I need to be perfect. I need to write something different than I've written in the past. And that's a lot of pressure, because then you're constantly...
because your goals and expectations were to be read by, thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, as opposed to a more limited audience?
I think my goal is just to be published, have a book.
Just to be published.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's kind of... See, and this is... And we've talked about but not in public. So when, and this is, I think, the wrong attitude to have, is that when something doesn't get published, I take that as, oh, you did something wrong. You need to write better. You need to do something different. When a lot of it, so when my first book got rejected, there was a book that was somewhat similar, even though I don't think it was that similar, that had done really badly 6 months or a year before. And then the editors are reading that. They're like, it's like book X rejection. You know what I mean? So that's just luck. Looking back, it's not that my book sucked. It was that, unfortunately, I didn't write it 2 years earlier when
someone else's book sucked.
Yeah.
That was the problem. So is your second manuscript is the one that got the interest?
No, the first one, I did this random novel about, and in a way, I didn't plan it. The Love Story, the movie Love Story. You ever hear of that? It won an Academy Award. Anyway, I'm sure you've heard of it about it. It's this couple at Harvard, and he's on the hockey. It's actually one of Tommy Lee Jones's first movies.
Oh,
and he's on. This was really. It's like a sappy, an early rom-com. Anyway, so it's she's got cancer. She dies at the. I hope I'm not spoiling that for you guys.
It's okay.
Anyway, it's this love story at Harvard, and then I wrote this kind of quirky, ironic book where it was kind of love story-ish at Harvard, and the woman has a brain tumor, and it's kind of weird. And I think some people oh, this is like love stories. They thought, oh, you know what I mean? That was a good hook, even though that wasn't my intention. But that one was really quirky. And then a lot of the responses from the editors after my agent sent out was, it wasn't, in a way, I tapped into something commercial, but then I didn't, almost kind of what you're talking about, Tim, with the genre fiction, right? Where, I tapped into something, but then I didn't do the beats that genre kind of requires. So then for my next book, I was like, oh, I get it. I just need to tap into something commercial and then have those beats. So I almost kind of embraced that criticism. And then I did something that I thought was far more commercial. And in this book, it was kind of a wedding book where instead of, you always hear about the crazy brides. I wrote about a crazy groom, and I did it kind of on, the crazy groom version of some, rom-com-y thing, but with my kind of voice. But then, that book then got rejected in that, guys don't want to read that stuff, and it's about a guy. You know what I mean? So it was so then I kind of...
Wouldn't women want to read that?
Well, that's, I would think.
I want to read it.
But you know what I mean? It was like against that. So in a way, I don't know, maybe I wasn't smart enough where I tried to twist the genre, right? And then they're like, why are you twisting the genre? Like, nobody's going to buy this.
I think that's a really like limited view. It's like you're not writing Jack Reacher, so nobody's gonna buy it. That seems ridiculous to me because the audience is so much bigger than that. Not to mention folks who aren't traditionally married who might be interested in that.
But I think it's almost as if, like they're looking at recipes and, this recipe doesn't fit my definition of an apple pie, so I don't want it.
Yep.
Unless you're the transcendent author who's graduated from Iowa and everyone is looking at, and then maybe they'll give you a little bit more rope.
So you've got 2 finished manuscripts. You've had
somewhere
interest from agents. Are those firmly in the past now, or are those things that you'd consider pitching again or self-publishing?
Well, but then, the problem is theoretically I could kind of try again with one of those books, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life trapped in a book that I wrote 15 years ago. You know what I mean?
What about just 3 months?
Tim, will you be my agent? You'll send it out for me?
I'll send it out for you.
But now everything is so dated. You know what I mean? I don't have generative AI in the book. I don't have...
It's okay. It's a period piece. So 2010s.
2010 period.
Yeah, I don't know. Like theoretically, maybe I should dust it off and try that again. But I'm just so beaten down by that. You know what I mean? I'm just... It's just hard for me. It's like trying again with a bad relationship. You know what I mean?
How long was the build up to getting that interest? Like, had you sent it out to a lot of different places and then or a lot of agents, or was it kind of?
So what happened was that my first novel, I had one agent. He sent it to all the big publishing houses. It got rejected. And then I did a little bit of work on that novel, and I landed a second agent who would send out the novel again, which is that's majorly lucky because most agents, once it's been shopped, won't even touch it. You know what I mean? It's like radioactive. So I somehow convinced this other guy to do that. And then when I had him, I was like, oh, I got this other book that I'm writing. And he read the book. He's like, oh, I really, you know what I mean? So in a way that got him more excited about the first book.
Yep.
So that was almost like me having a second kid to give a kidney to the first kid. but then they both die. You know what I mean? Yeah. So then, then he was he was really, really into this. Right. And he sent it out, because I think that when you have a book that kind of kind of plays with the genre, it has the potential to be big, but then if it's not big, then it has the potential to be like nothing.
Yeah. You
know what I mean? It's almost like a really high stakes bet where you're either going to do really well or you're going to be me. You know what I mean?
So I kind of stepping back to like the short stories, because I've written short stories, but I've never tried to get them published anywhere. And thinking about that experience of just sending them out to journals, and it's like, you kind of just send them out and send them out and send them out. If someone likes and they publish it, that's great. Or like, what's that?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of, this was, I'm old. So this is back in the day when you actually used to send them in paper form, you'd mail them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, not all, I'm not that old, but, I think when I start, but it's, the thing about journals is that there's so many of them. Yeah. And then the issue is then you get a little bit, like arrogant and snotty, and you're like, is that journal good enough for my work? Which is, my mother was a writer and she had the attitude of, I don't care. I just want to get published, which is probably the attitude to have, where it's just, it's not like I need to get published in the Missouri Review or, some really, and I did actually get in a couple of pretty good journals, but, at some point just keep, the idea I think is to keep writing. So the better attitude to have is to just keep writing and get published wherever. And because sometimes, it's the small journal where someone will spot you.
Yep.
But then that goes back to what's your goal, right? Is your goal to be spotted? Is your goal to be read? Like what's your end game? Like what are you looking to do?
With a long form, one, I think Tim kind of covers this a little bit, but one, have you any interest in revisiting it as a new story, the other two are kind of in the past, it seems like, but one, do you have any interest in revisiting like a long form, something new? And two, have you ever thought about doing like a self-publish instead of going the traditional route?
I don't know. Like, Walt Whitman published this book, right? I don't know. They're always the success stories, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It just scares me. Like, I don't know. Like, there's
Yeah.
something about that process that is just overwhelming. Even though, we live in an age, like I do, now I also have a blog, right? That I write it, like I have an anonymous blog, and it's kind of freeing to be able to just write stuff and just hit publish and not have to worry about what the editor is going to think of this line or that line, or if I'm doing this right. So I guess self-publishing is just that on a grander scale. But I don't know. I just think once you self-publish your book, then you have the burden of trying to get people to buy it, and that's a big burden.
Yep, sure is.
That's a burden that Russ is dealing with right now.
That's what I'm dealing with right now. So yeah, it's another kind of, and I wouldn't say it's debate. Tim and I kind of took two separate paths on this too, where early on I was deciding if I wanted to go the traditional route or self-publish, and I forget when exactly it was. I was like, I'm just going to self-publish this thing. I have more control over everything, and went and did a whole research of finding an editor and doing that process, proofreaders and cover design. I got kind of lucky. I have family who's, very talented. So I was like able to kind of resource some things. So it didn't feel like as much of a burden to me, but now I'm feeling it because now it's like all on me, which even if it feels like in traditionally published, it's still on the author to really kind of push themselves.
Unless you're like the top of the top.
You're right. Unless you have some massive platform that's already existing or something like that the publisher's like, sure, we'll help you out. But other than that, it's kind of like you're on your own. So, and I'm very much feeling on my own at this point. So,
yeah.
But I think you're doing well. I mean, you're selling about a book a day. I mean, not that it doesn't take effort, but
it takes
going forward. Yeah. It's funny. You say we're on two different paths, where I feel like you were on a path and I'm like on a prayer.
You're like,
it's very,
you're in the woods, kind of lost a bit, like looking
I'm
for
just like in the woods, like King Lear in it. Like, why?
Where did I leave that rice trail?
Can somebody help me?
Like I could see someone telling me, if, I meet at a bar and I'm complaining about my publishing situation, we live in a time where it's now pretty easy to self-publish your book. There's really not an excuse not to, in a way where, you could try, like, why not?
Yeah.
What you have to lose, really.
Yeah.
But there is, right? I mean, there's preconceived notions about the quality of self-published books. And sometimes, sometimes they're wonderful and sometimes they're not. And I think because it's so easy to publish, you get the gamut of something absolutely wonderful and something you're like, I cannot believe that you released this not proofread thing that makes no sense. So I understand the hesitancy and...
there's a stigma to self-publishing your book.
Yeah.
And that probably stopped me from ever looking really at that part. But that stigma is built by the industry, or by the, is it justified?
I mean, it does work in a way like your short stories work, that I think a self-published book at least gives you something like you'll have metrics for the next book. Like I sold this many of the last one if you decide to go traditionally published for the following one. We've had folks on the cast that have gone both ways, that have started self-published, that got a deal, that are going back to self-published, and vice versa. So it seems like it's not just one or the other, at least for the folks that we're talking to. There seems to be more synergy between self-published and traditionally published now than there was. But I totally get that there's that, negative preconceived notion of it. It's one of the reasons why I was trying to get and am trying to get traditionally published, because same thing. Like I don't want to have to do all the things that you did, Russ. I don't want to design a cover. I don't want to pay for an editor, although I'm going to have to.
But then going back to what Russ, I have friends who publish books who wind up hiring marketing people for them. You know what I mean? It's not just because you published a book with a publishing house, they're just going to do everything for you. And a lot of times you're going to disagree with stuff they do, right?
Yep.
So, now it seems like I'm arguing the devil's advocate, but you have more agency then to kind of, I don't know, is it better to self-publish your book or to be a book that a publishing house doesn't really care about and they're just putting it on because they're really looking for a half Lebanese author?
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't champion my ethnicity at all, but maybe I should.
No, you should totally. What are you doing?
So then when you moved you went short fiction, long form fiction, and then you moved to you wrote for the New York Times. You've got a couple pieces in there which are more autobiographical, right? Away from the fiction and more into reality?
So that's like, I remember when I was in my 20s, I wrote this somewhat sexual story, and there used to be a site called Nerve. You ever remember Nerve?
Yeah.
Anyway, so it was basically an autobiographical piece, and they wanted to publish it as nonfiction. And I was like, because there is a stigma to publishing nonfiction. You know what I mean? I was like, no, publish it a fiction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because also, you know, I want to be the author, not just the one who writes about my sexual exploits, right? Like, you know what I mean? And they were like, if you publish this as nonfiction, you know, we'll put it on the cover and we'll do this and that.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was like, no, I want it as fiction, right? And then once my 2 novels got taken, I'd be like, I'll write about fucking anything. You know what I mean? Like, like, you know what I mean? So it's like I've lost that, like you lose all dignity. You're just, you know. So basically, you know, then I just started writing more. But that was, again, it was me going back to the short form in a way, right? Like, and then, but it was, you know, when you write nonfiction, and the problem with nonfiction is there are just not that many markets for it. Like really just a handful of markets for personal essays, what I'm writing. But the essays that there are, the markets that there are, they're really, really big. You know what I mean? So if you can get published in the New York Times, like you have hundreds of thousands of people looking at your stuff. And it's, so, but that's back to me being like my pragmatic mind going, oh, if I do this, then I can be in some place that's, you know, gets a lot of people to view me. Right.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'm not advocating, you know, that's just me constantly thinking like, how can I write something that could be more marketable? How can I do something that more people will read?
Yeah.
It's so interesting because it seems like with everything you've done, you've had success. Maybe not your version that you wanted of success, but you've had, I mean, your short stories were published, your long form fiction was represented. And then when you move to nonfiction, you're in the New York Times. Like, I don't know how many people it feels like an upward trajectory to me. Maybe it doesn't feel like that to you.
Feels like just constantly having my dreams dashed.
I could sit down and write something for the Times today. I don't think the Times would publish it, Michael.
Well, but my goal has been to like get a book published, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I haven't done that, and that kind of really pisses me off.
Yeah.
And I was telling Tim that there was, you know, when I saw, you know, did you see The Road to Perdition? Where, you know, there's the scene at the end where, you know, Tom Hanks comes and he shoots the bad guy in the bathtub, which is like this big climax moment. And instead of being happy, he just like sadly walks off. You know, that's how I feel like publishing a book would be at this point. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to be, it's like shooting the bad guy in the bathtub. Like, that's basically my goal at this point.
And
like,
the job's done.
Revenge. Cold, sad revenge.
Yep. That's it. I'm done.
Daniel Craig was the bad guy. So I want to shoot Daniel Craig with his long, cool hair in the bathtub. And then Daniel Craig ultimately will have like a huge career. So it's not like a bad thing for Daniel, and marry Rachel Weisz.
You just gotta die in a bathtub before you become, you know, a hit. Or something.
But like, that's just you're right. Everything it's a narrative, right? The narrative of it's just the goal I want to get. And I can't just kind of, you know, theoretically I should be like, okay, maybe that's not, you know, maybe I'm just happy writing nonfiction. Right. So I think the problem is kind of sticking to your goals.
And people, I mean, once again, not obviously I fall on the side of optimism a little too much, but I feel like people and audiences have been interested in reading your voice, whether that be fiction or nonfiction. There's interest in what you're writing and how you turn a phrase and the things you share. I don't have a question. I just think that's really cool.
But that pisses me off because it makes me think like, because it makes me think like, if it weren't for these preconceived notions, I would have been published 15 years ago and people would be reading my work because I have a voice that kind of resonates with most people. Right.
Right. But
it didn't, you know what I mean? It was like, because I didn't fit into those, what was popular at the time. Yeah. And then
with those agents and with those publishers, but I feel like that doesn't cast a shadow over your whole trajectory. I feel like it's a crummy moment, but there's so much positivity around it that, you know, I feel like I think you take one of those manuscripts, probably the Groomzilla, and you push that one forward. I feel like that's something people would really want to read.
Thank you, Tim.
But that's me.
But that was like, I was like, this is like marketable. And then, you know, it's no. So it's just, I don't know. Being a writer is just getting rejected.
I also feel like gender roles are questioned so much more now than they were when you initially went to bat for that, that with some light updating, I think that could find an audience.
Tim, you're just trying to get me happy again. And then, then I'll be back in
That's what this podcast is all about, Michael. We're about making people happy.
Yeah, you'll come back on in 3 months, like, I hate you guys. Why did you do this to me?
Published.
You'll be doing you'll be doing we'll be doing another podcast from the psych ward.
Yeah, can you please introduce me to your agent?
Yeah.
No, sorry.
No. No one's in a bathtub, right?
So keep hope alive, Tim. Thank you.
That's what I say. Keep hope alive. I mean, another reason why I say keep hope alive is because you're still pushed to write. I think you've just changed your platforms again. Now away from the kind of nonfiction, you've moved in. I mean, you're still in nonfiction, but you're blogging now, right? You blogged a little bit around like family nonfiction, which was under your name, right? You talked about your son and your wife, and now you've moved on to, what did you say, anonymous blogging?
Yeah, I just blog about youth sports and stuff like that. Just because, I don't want my name getting out there. Theoretically, it could hurt my kids in some way. So it's just easier to do it that way. But I'm still writing, right?
Yeah. Coming back to the rejection comment about how writing is about being rejected, I feel like Tim and I, again, on two separate paths here, where he's like, I want to go for this traditional route and just get constantly rejected. Where I was I'm going to delay it. I'll self-publish. And I was like, it's out there. I can't reject me if I self-publish it. And now I feel like now I'm getting rejected because no one wants to read it.
Objectively, I was like, what a great idea. I'll just get rejected a ton and then I'll self-publish. But with every additional rejection, I'm like, why would I put this thing out in the world?
Oh, totally.
Nobody loves me.
I've totally been there. Like at writing schools, they should have like half of it should be just like mental.
It should just be one class where you get slapped in the face overall.
It should just be like dealing with constant utter failure. Also, when you write stuff and you get rejected, it's not just, it's like when your kid gets rejected for something, it feels really personal and it's soul crushing in a way where, if you get rejected for other things, it doesn't quite hurt as much.
I got a very personal rejection, which was, this is normally the thing that I'd be really into. You're right. But unfortunately, I didn't like your manuscript.
Oh my God. Tim, you're giving me PTSD. Like, I think I have that exact letter, like in 7 different
probably the same guy.
Yeah,
copy pasta. But I do, like, as much as it hurts, I will self-publish if I don't turn out. If I can't get interest from an agent. What is horrifying to me is that I could get interest from an agent and then still go nowhere, right?
But that was like, when I originally got an agent, my first agent, I was so happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was like ecstatic.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a writing professor at the time, and she saw my happiness and she looked at me coldly and said, "Michael, you realize this doesn't mean your book's getting published." Right? And I was like,
tough love.
I was like, you're so mean. And I remember being so upset, but truer words have never been spoken. You know what I mean? It was like totally accurate. Yeah, which is sad, right? Because you looked at, there's a time where I looked at success as getting an agent, and it really isn't.
I think my goal, like my absolute goal, and it sounds like baloney, it's like an objective goal. It's that to take my licks from this process, eventually get it out there, but really do anything I can do to get back into the routine of writing, because I want the writing to be the goal in and of itself. And I know that sounds romantic and it probably sounds a bit naive, but it's really the only thing I can actually count on that actually gives me oxygen and happiness on a day. It's a nice thing to wake up to in the morning, right? As opposed to the rejection emails that I'm getting from
But so if you were to like do that and never get published, would you be like, okay, that was worth it?
So I feel confident that no matter what, some version of success, kind of like I said when I was talking to you, will come. And it might not be traditionally published. There might not be any agent, but I think I'll be read. I think 100 to 200 people will read a story, and to me, that's a success. If enough people, if those people cared a little bit, maybe 50 people enjoyed the book, that's a win for me, because there really is this kind of positive dopamine loop that I get just from the writing, away from the accolades. And I know it's tough to disassociate the two, right? Because you want praise, you want to be rewarded, but there's also a reward in and of itself. It's I don't know.
But it's like, I'll look at all these writing groups and the writing industry, the how to write better, and you'll go to, a bookstore and there'll be, 3 rows about, how to write better and how to plot better and how to do this better. And people spend all their money going to these conferences trying to find an agent. And most of these people, the vast majority of these people can't write. You know what I mean? I'll be like suckers. You know what I mean? Like, is it just, is it an industry? And am I just like one of those people who is, being kind of delusioned or, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm scared of that. I'm scared of
putting the work in and constantly, like you said earlier, just keep writing, just keep doing it. And, hopefully the time will come where the right timing, right space, right person maybe reads something you've written and you get kind of pulled into it, But
the thing is, I've been there and then that didn't work out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I've had people read something I wrote and want to represent me or whatever. And I don't know. I think you just have, and then again, I have friends who have been published and are no more happier than I, you know what I mean? Maybe more, Kurt Cobain killed himself. You know what I mean?
He had other things going on.
No, but still, like theoretically, if he was just like, maybe, he reached those heights and then realized they weren't, it's empty. And then what am I really living for? So maybe I would kill myself maybe I'd be the guy in the bathtub.
You'd be the guy in the bathtub.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No.
So maybe there's a good thing in not getting published. Cause again, if you're up on the top, maybe it's different, but if you have a book that maybe, 3,000 people read or 5,000, I don't know. Is that better? I mean, from my perspective, I would say yes. But if I was in that position, maybe I would say it's just all bullshit. You know what I mean? I really don't know.
I think I've hit the point of like, and Tim and I have talked about this, like, what's the measure of success, and obviously getting published and whatnot. And then I think for me, self-publishing, that was big, that was awesome, cool. I'm out there, I did it all myself, but that's fine. And then for me, it was more of, all right, let me get past that number of books sold, not so much because I care about the sales, but more of like, oh, this is people who aren't friends and family reading this book and buying this. And then getting that first like 4 or 3-star review from someone being like, wow, you read the book and Medium liked it. And then getting the first 2 and then even getting the first 2-star and seeing someone rank it like that, I was like, not only do I not know you, not only did you buy my book and didn't like it, you came on a platform and 2-starred it. Yes.
I understand the 5 stars and the 2 stars, but how can you medium like something enough to write a review?
Yeah. So do you regret self-publishing? Like, how do you feel about it now, like after going through the process?
I'm very happy that was the decision I made. And more so because I've learned so much about the process. And even though I self-published, like learning about the industry in a weird way, like knowing what I wanted for cover, doing the back cover blurb, doing all this stuff myself, coming up with like marketing plans and understanding all the things that a lot of stuff I'd have to do anyways if I got traditionally published. So as a learning experience, I'm completely happy with it. I also looked at it as like a separate goal of like, now this is like my business card. I have nothing published. I have no short stories anywhere. I've not written for anyone that has anything to say like, oh, this is he knows what he's doing. So having that out there and having like a decent response to it for me is like, now if I write a second book, which I'm already working on, it could be like, I can maybe go shop that around and see like, hey, I've got something here. I've got a platform. I have a book that's done fine. People enjoy it. And maybe I get a agent or something that way, or I just keep self-publishing. But no, I think it was the best decision I made.
I mean, when you hear me speaking or Tim speaking, are you like, why don't you just self-publish your book? Like, why are you complaining about the industry so much?
A little bit. Part of me, a little bit. I think because Tim and I have talked about this, I was like, well, how long are you gonna keep going for the rejections? That's gonna kind of keep pulling you down when you could hire an editor. Yeah, that puts you in a little bit of the hole, but you can hire an editor, polish it up, and self-publish, and it's out there, and you have something that's there. You have something that's published, and you can, say like, I've published something, and that's, I think, again, the accomplishment in itself. I know there's.
And it comes to goals, right? Like I'd say that obviously I'm envious of where you are. It blows my mind. I can't even picture the fact that there's like this year, right? You'll have like over 1,000 people who've read your book.
Yeah.
That's amazing to me. That's absolutely great. And your goal was to get it done and get it out. Same thing. I was actually kind of surprised that you were going self-published. I understand now, but at first I was like, why not? Are you selling yourself short? Why not at least give it a go?
Yeah.
But now gave it a go.
Yeah.
I can see, oh, like this could be, there's always so many roadblocks to writing and there's so much self-doubt anyway that like, because we're like open nerves, you know? We're like a sore tooth when it comes to feedback and response. And I think that's why we can write.
Yeah.
But will that rejection and will that pain, discourage me from moving forward? And it won't, but it certainly could have.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think from a psychological perspective, like, would my therapist say I should have self-published my book 10 years? You know what I mean? Like, probably yes, right? Like, and probably from, like, would that have helped me, like, with writer's block and stuff? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't help me feel good about my writing getting rejected constantly.
Yeah. I think I for me, I mean, it's a weird thing with self-publishing. I've shifted the rejection. I've shifted from from an agent or a publisher or someone like that rejecting me to actual readers rejecting me, giving me a 2 stars. But I'm like, heck, you read it though. That's awesome. And then
2 stars is not no stars. Like,
right.
You know what
it's
I mean?
not
like,
no stars.
Like...
And they took the time. And then some people gave me 3 stars, actually gave a review. So like, that's a rejection I'm better with, because that's who the book is for. It's for readers. And you have to accept that people are going to like it or not.
To me, that doesn't feel like a rejection. You know what I mean? That feels like they're working with you. You know what I mean? They're giving it, they're treating it like it's a book that should be reviewed. So that in a way is a compliment. There are many 2-star reviews of traditionally published books. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
It's not like they all get 4 stars, or whatever.
Yeah. And part of me kind of wishes they would leave a review so I could be like, all right, get some feedback. So I understand. Was it the writing? Was it was it something like, oh, I hate this book because the ending sucked? Like, okay, maybe anything about endings, it's like almost a weird feedback loop for myself to be like, let me focus on that for the next book and make that better, maybe if I need to, But
that's my problem. You don't want to focus on it too much, right? Like,
right. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to be like Steve Jobs, who are like, buy this because you want this. You know what I mean? As compared to market testing everything and being.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not healthy for a writer. Michael, thank you for joining us. This was awesome.
Thanks so much for having me. I think, Tim was just feeling bad for me. That's why he asked me.
I really wanted to see, I think this is like an insider's perspective of one of the paths. Like, you were so close that I think you should give it a go again.
AAA ball, you're right there.
I want that most recent manuscript out there. If you're looking for beta readers again, I'm happy to read it. If you want to send it along.
Yeah, 2 right here.
Really? You guys are too nice. I'll dig it up somewhere.
Yeah, dig it up. Dig it up, dust it off, and I think you should query it again.
Just even these words are painful. It's like you're mentioning like towns where I fought in France. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh my God. Like every word is like query. Oh, like, you know what I mean? I lost men there. I lost a lot.
Or self-publish.
Or self-publish. Is that a retreat? No, we're not retreating. Well, it was awesome. Thank you again for joining us. And
great to meet you, Russ.
Yeah, anytime you want to come back on,
Michael,
let us know.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah. So anytime.
Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Michael, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Okay, man. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
So that's our episode. Thanks for listening. You can join us next episode where we're going to get into, what are we getting into? We're talking.
Knock, knock.
Oh, no, I'm not answering that door.
Who's there?
Who's there?
We're talking about humor next week.
Oh my God. Oh Lord. I don't know if
and bad humor?
I don't know if I can fix that in post. There's no bad joke effect I can put on. If you enjoyed this episode, an interview with Michael, and you know someone else that would, you should let them know. You can follow us on Instagram at Writer Syndrome Books, and you can find all of our episodes or reach out to us, find our contact info at writersyndrome.com.